Hello, and welcome to the first of what will hopefully be many Photoshop art tutorials. I'm Zach, and I'm going to show you how I draw using Photoshop. Is there an easier way? Maybe. This is how I do it, and I've been doing it for years. I pick up new things all the time, so if you think I can do something better, feel free to leave it in the comments below. I'm using Adobe Photoshop CS5. This tutorial should work fine for most versions of Photoshop. Some of the hotkeys might be different though. I'm also drawing with a 4" by 6" Wacom Intuos 4. First, let's talk about my setup. I have your basic toolbar here, and here are a few more advanced tools which I'll get into more during a later tutorial. Then you have your color swatch window as well as the layers window. I also have the navigator window open, but I don't use it too much. Now, time for drawing. I usually pick US paper for my new project. It's just a simple 8.5 by 11 sized canvas. First thing you'll want to do is create a new layer. This is the button here. With this new layer selected and selecting the brush tool, you'll want to select the size brush you'll use. Then you draw. How well you draw completely depends on your own skill. I've been drawing for over 20 years, so don't get upset if your art doesn't turn out how you like it. I've put in the time and the practice to get the level I'm at, and that's all it takes, is time and practice. This first layer is just going to be the sketch, so feel free to be messy. Get the basic idea out there. Don't worry about all the tiny details. That's next. Once you have a sketch done, we start the inks. Create a new layer above the sketch layer. Then, while having the brush tool selected, choose the correct thickness of your brush. I use between 5 pixels and 7 pixels. When you ink, this is where you take your time. As you can see, Ctrl-Z is my friend while drawing. If a line doesn't turn out right, I just Ctrl-Z and redo it. That can happen once or twice or 20 times. It all depends on the line. Also, don't be afraid to use multiple layers to ink. It's a great way to get the lines to look the way you want without having to worry about messing up previous lines you already drew. Now, if you'd like to do a second sketch layer above the original sketch, so you can get some of the details figured out before you ink the drawing, that works too. I usually don't do more than one sketch layer, but that's always depending on how detailed the art is. Once you're done with the inks, it's time for color. Use the Magic Wand tool and select the area outside the inked lines on the inked layer. Press Ctrl-Shift-I, which inverses the selection so the inks are selected. Then go to Select, Modify, and Contract. Select 2 pixels, and then the selection around the inks will shrink by 2 pixels. With the paint bucket selected, as well as a base color, you create a new layer underneath the inks. Then click to fill in the selection. Now comes the coloring. While the base color is selected still, pick the colors you want and color. I use the brush tool at different sizes depending on where I'm coloring. It's really pretty simple. I also use a combination of the Select tool and the Pen tool to do some coloring and creating the blast underneath, things like that. Now, the next step is shading, which can get kind of complicated. I will try to explain it in the simplest way I can. So, bear with me, feel free to pause, rewind, do whatever you need. The first thing you do is duplicate the color layer by dragging it onto the New Layer button. Then, hitting Ctrl-L, you adjust the levels to make it all black, just like this. Once it's black, you lower the opacity down of the level to the level of shadow you want on the art. I'm picking around 35%. Using the lasso tool, I draw and select the area that I want to be lighter. In this case, it's the glow from the blast. Once you have the area selected, You use the eraser tool with 0 hardness and a large brush size, around 450 pixels. Then, bring the flow down to between 10 and 12%. You only need to erase the new shadow layer, and you want to erase more towards the light source. I'll get more into lighting and color theory in future tutorials. Just do these same steps all over the art. I also add more colors depending on the scene I'm drawing. In this case, I'm drawing yellow on the shiny parts of Mega Man. I then erase the part of the yellow that's farther from the blast. All this on a separate layer, of course. Once that's done, create a new layer above all the layers and make it a screen layer. Then, using the brush the same way as the eraser with the same settings, this time with yellow coloring, it helps make the art glow. This is actually a really cool and easy way to do energy or reflection of light, things like that. Mess around with the size of the brush. Even a different texture brush makes things glow differently. Now, in the case for this specific piece of art, I chose to do a few small things, like make the ink lines a gradient of blue. I also chose to do more erasing of the shadow, this time completely deleting it from the spots by pressing the delete once those areas were selected. The last thing I do to my art is add a texture. This is completely optional as it changes the feeling of the art, so it's really up to your own opinion of your own art. I use textures from cgtextures.com. They have a great selection of metal, both clean and rusted. I like to use this texture a lot. Lay the texture on top of the art, making it cover the entire canvas. Then, make the layer overlay. Sometimes, I'll use either soft light or hard light, but overlay really brings out the colors. I also usually bring the opacity down below 50%. The last step is to add your signature if you already haven't, and then you're done. Well, that's it for the basic art tutorial for Adobe Photoshop, and how I do my thing. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the, comments below. I plan to do more of these, so if there's something you want to see specifically, any type of technique, or if you wanted me to get into more details about drawing itself and not just using Adobe Photoshop, leave that in the comments as well. I promise I will read everything that you guys write. Subscribe and share, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks!